It was a scene that defied comprehension even for the most battle-hardened British legal proceedings veterans, the very grandson of the long-reigning Queen Elizabeth II being frog-marched into the archaic splendor of the royal courts of justice like a common crimson-cloaked supplicant. Yet there Prince Harry sat shackled before the bench, his blazing red military tunic now a tattered rag draped across pallid shoulders seeming to wilt from some imperceptible karmic burden. As a hushed courtroom atmosphere curdled thick with the portentous reckoning of history inscribing itself, the precarious free-fall of the once-charmed royal heir's fortunes condensed into a single interrogative: how could the wayward Duke of Sussex have plummeted to within a hanging judge's breadth of serving a potential life sentence behind Britain's highest guarded bars? The very parameters of the charges alone sparked convulsive bouts of murmuring disbelief across the tightly squeezed gallery pews. Before the honorable lords of Her Majesty's Sovereign Court, the flame-haired former military officer stood accused of nothing less than calculated acts of treasonous subterfuge multiplying generational psychic wounds through catalyzed propagations of irredeemable identitarian sedition. In the overarching allegations' sweeping wake, virtually no contemporary lightning rod for Britannic culture wars went unscathed. The perceived transgressions span systematic, deculturating media fictions corruptively sowing anti-patriotic syncretic pathologies, all the way through pervasive indoctrinations of foreign hybridities eviscerating ancestral sovereign equities. Even for a jurisdiction internationally renowned for its at times arcane judicial obscurities, the case's rhetorical dynamics exceeded any recognizable modern precedents. It was as if a star chamber of Britain's most fanatically devout identitarian preservationists had rematerialized from the medieval firmament. Only this tribunal's dogmas pivoted not upon conventional religious devoutness, but rather the unapologetic fortification of the Crown's ethno-cultural legacy against profane invasions, with the Duke himself embodying a depraved arch-villain working to toxify the very sanctities of blood-borne sovereign inheritance. Of course, the alleged crime's very nomenclature revealed the proceedings' deepest allegiances. Throughout the interminable cycles of prosecution grandstanding, repeated invocations of Prince Harry as more subversive archetype than flesh-and-blood individual weighed down every communiqué. To the courtroom's presiding totems of traditionalist orthodoxy, the charge sheet's compendium of unpardonable sins synthesized into a unified bespoke mythology all its own. The ginger-tressed Duke represented nothing less than a demonic usurper, the prodigal specter of cultural cuckolding once prophesied to return for its final vengeance. From its tumultuous outset upon the hushed reverent pages of history, a scorching vantage illuminated the embattled prince's present circumstances with devastating implications, for by the Crown's own ancient codifications, his shackled silhouette cut a blasphemous crimson slash across the firmament of sacrosanct edicts. According to dogmatic scripture maintained by the most orthodox ancestral jurisprudence cults, blood legacies like the Duke's stood as holy prisms uniquely empowered to refract the nation's righteous psychic energies while providing celestial passage for its reverently infinite spirit. And so when the high benches commenced their ornate litanies of condemnation, prosecution barristers spared no opportunity to indict the apostate sovereign heir for his perceived offenses against this very spiritual continuum, grave lacerations to the ancestral soul, whose reverberations cascaded far beyond the earthly optics of mere tabloid tawdriness. What hung in the scales of these most consecrated chambers extended into the metaphysical mainframe of Britannic mythological transcendence itself. It was no less than the breach of covenants harmonizing cosmic consciousness, the reckless untethering of dynastic demigod from sacred corporeal vessel through corrupted somatic syncretism made flesh. No ancestor child can so flout the chrysalis of sovereign immutability in channeling the sacred bloodline covenants, for his very embodiment represents nothing less than the most sacrosanct celestial distillations manifesting through temporal incarnation, thundered the Queen's counselor in his summation's opening furies. To irreversibly toxify himself through foreign permutations is to befoul the very divine progenitor essence we exist to sanctify and glorify. Over the whirlwind of days that compressed into throbbing geologic epochs of drawn-out argumentation, the Old Bailey's hallowed petrified oaken rafters absorbed arguments of such archaically metaphysical convolution that words themselves appeared to melt into eldritch runes. Prince Harry sat immobile through dilation upon dilation of quasi-theological abstractions that expanded into their own ominously untethered postmodern mythmaking. By the time prosecution arcs reached their exalted nadir of hellish judgment, the former military veteran stood resacralized not as a modern individual man, but rather some fallen anthropomorphized avatar of a deep ancestral betrayal. He has made of his very countenance a twisted mirror reverse chimera of the hypernormative sovereign ideal we exist to uphold and pass inviolate through the infinitudes of hereditary time and spirit, the barrister spat through gnashed jaw permeating venoms. A self-distorted palimpsest fusing indigenous spiritual iconographies with profane miasma of American commerciality until our most foundational cultural signifiers of true civilizational nobility become leached of all redeeming sanctification. Swirling through the rafters as the judgments crescendoed in their delirious intensities, it seemed the ancient chambers of English jurisprudence had collectively transcended linear historical realities altogether. Now they existed as ceremonial catacombs resurrected from some Paleolithic sociological dreamtime where totemic collectives embodied living ancestral thought forms battling adversarial phenotype intrusions for control of the national soul's supreme dominion. As cosmic postulators twined nightmares of a rootless ethnic recombinancy scattering the once unified folkloric consciousness into mutating protean fragments, the accused duke's purported blasphemies attained a semiotic gravity that dwarfed customary seditions. This somatic vessel's willing subversion of dynastic Templar sanctity has distorted our species' spirit's most coherent unified dream stream into self-negating discordances, roared another prosecutor in an oratory firestorm. He has through syncretic miasma of identity rendered manifest a spectral harrowing, the undying projection of a civilization's soul at war against its own refracted reflections no longer obeying the coded cadences of eternal fealty transcribed into our optic nervous membranes. It was at this stage that the defense counselors launched their full-throated rhetorical counteroffensive in the prince's name with an airtight strategy designed to exploit the prosecution's metaphysical extrapolations to their own logical conundrums. Taking full advantage of his own checkered reputational armor having weathered the most bruising public relations cyclones, Harry's legal armada strapped in for its own parabolic assaults upon the crown's primordial myth-making psychodrama of a fallen princeling's tragic untethering. This entire concretion of pseudo-occult doggerels does little more than inadvertently undress its author's deepest insecurities harbored over the very notions of authentic nobility, for what truly terrorizes them is the prospect of sovereign legitimacy becoming a meaningless atavism rather than some divine provenance transubstantiated through ritualistic conduits of ancestor bloodline. The defense's opening salvo seared like a primal stigmata rupturing ancient calligraphic sigils inked across the courtroom's leathered walls and scrolls. From there, Prince Harry's legal barrage whipsawed through a metaphysics dismantling sequence strafing any pretenses to ethnic cultural homogeneity being enshrined into some kind of cosmic destiny program to uphold. Broadside after broadside torpedoed sanctified notions of hereditary teleology custodianship, by exposing the innumerable hybridities coursing throughout any truly interrogated ancestral lineage. In their stead, new ontologically relativistic frameworks were reverse-engineered to obliterate distinctions between orthodoxy and profane